Imagine this. Right now, at this very moment, a Microsoft data center is consuming as much electricity as 100,000 American households, not per year, right now. And Microsoft is building dozens more of these power-hungry giants across the planet. In fact, Microsoft just announced plans to spend $80 billion in a single year building artificial intelligence data centers. $80 billion. That's more money than the gross domestic product of 147 countries. But here's what Microsoft isn't telling you. Every single one of those data centers has a hidden dependency that's creating a global supply crisis, a metal so critical that without it, the entire artificial intelligence revolution could grind to a halt. And right now, we're running out of it. This metal isn't lithium, it's not cobalt, it's not even copper, it's silver. And what you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you understand the technology powering your daily life. If you want to stay ahead of the technological and financial shifts that mainstream media isn't covering, make sure you hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell. Drop a like if you believe people deserve to know the truth about where our technology actually comes from. Your support helps us investigate these critical stories. Now, let's unpack why artificial intelligence might trigger the biggest silver shortage in human history. On January 3, 2025, Microsoft dropped a bombshell announcement that sent shockwaves through the technology and energy sectors. Brad Smith, Microsoft's vice chair and president, revealed that the company is on track to invest approximately $80 billion in fiscal year 2025 to build artificial intelligence-enabled data centers around the world. Let that number sink in for a moment. $80 billion in 1 year. To put that in perspective, Microsoft spent $53 billion on capital expenditures in 2023. This new $80 billion commitment represents a 51% increase in just 2 years. Microsoft isn't alone in this spending frenzy. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy announced his company planned total capital expenditure spending of $75 billion in 2024, with even more in 2025. Google expects to spend $75 billion on artificial intelligence infrastructure alone in 2025. Meta, Apple, and every other technology giant are engaged in the same arms race, building data centers as fast as humanly possible. According to research from Del Oro Group, big technology companies spent $180 billion on data center expansions and related infrastructure in 2024 alone. Think about what's driving this unprecedented construction boom. Artificial intelligence models like ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, and Anthropic's Claude are transforming every industry you can imagine. Healthcare, finance, defense, education, entertainment, transportation. These systems require enormous computing power, and that power comes from thousands upon thousands of servers housed inside specialized facilities that consume staggering amounts of electricity and materials. A single hyperscale artificial intelligence data center can consume as much electricity as a small city. These centers are multiplying rapidly, with facilities being constructed across the United States, Europe, Asia, and virtually every continent. Here's where silver enters the picture, and why this matters far more than most people realize. Silver is the world's most electrically conductive metal, more conductive than copper, more conductive than gold, more conductive than any other substance on the periodic table. This isn't a minor technical detail. This is the fundamental reason why silver is absolutely essential to modern electronics, and particularly to the high-performance computing infrastructure that powers artificial intelligence. Every server inside a data center relies on silver. The advanced circuit boards use silver for low-resistance signal pathways. The connectors and switches that enable high-frequency data transmission contain silver. The power systems that deliver electricity to thousands of servers simultaneously depend on silver's unmatched conductivity. The thermal management systems that prevent these machines from overheating use silver-enhanced components. According to analysts at First Gold Group, if just 10% of new global data centers integrate silver-enhanced components in their power and cooling systems, industrial silver demand could rise by 5 to 10% over the next decade. 10% might sound modest until you understand the context. The global silver market is already in crisis. According to the Silver Institute, total silver demand exceeded 1.2 billion ounces in 2024, with industrial applications accounting for more than half of that total. But here's the critical issue. Mine production of silver has been essentially flat or declining. In 2025, global mined silver supply is expected to remain flat year over year at 813 million ounces. That's significantly below the demand of 1.2 billion ounces. Do the math. Demand of 1.2 billion ounces, supply of 813 million ounces. That's a deficit of nearly 400 million ounces in a single year. This isn't a new phenomenon. The silver market has been in structural deficit for 5 consecutive years. From 2021 through 2025, The cumulative deficit totals almost 820 million ounces. That's equivalent to an entire year of global mine production simply vanishing from available supply. Where did all that silver go? It went into solar panels, which now account for 29% of industrial silver demand compared to just 11% in 2014. It went into electric vehicles, which require 25 to 50 grams of silver per vehicle in battery management systems, power electronics, and charging infrastructure. With global electric vehicle sales hitting 17 million units in 2024, automotive silver demand is projected to grow 40% over the next decade. It went into 5G networks, which require silver-intensive components for the thousands of base stations and network infrastructure being deployed globally. It went into smartphones, tablets, wearables, and consumer electronics. A typical smartphone contains 7 to 34 milligrams of gold and a comparable amount of silver, and at approximately 1.4 billion units produced annually, that adds up fast. And increasingly, silver is going into artificial intelligence data centers. The semiconductor market, driven substantially by artificial intelligence chip production, reached $688 billion in 2024, up 13% from the prior year. Silver consumption in this sector continues climbing as artificial intelligence server deployments accelerate globally. Goldman Sachs estimates that power demand from data centers will rise by roughly 165% by 2030, as hyperscales deploy artificial intelligence clusters at unprecedented density, pushing ever more high-reliability components into servers, switches, and accelerators. Every one of those components requires silver. Let's talk about the scale of Microsoft's $80 billion investment and what it actually means in physical terms. According to leaked documents from April 2024, Microsoft already had more than 5 gigawatts of data center capacity at its disposal, with plans to add an additional 1.5 gigawatts in the first half of 2025. A gigawatt is 1 billion watts of power. To put that in perspective, a typical nuclear power plant generates about 1 gigawatt of electricity. Microsoft's existing data center infrastructure already consumes as much electricity as 5 large nuclear power plants running continuously, and they're adding capacity equivalent to another 1.5 nuclear plants. But even that isn't enough. Reports indicate that OpenAI, which Microsoft has invested billions of dollars into, is looking to work with other data center providers because Microsoft is unable to keep up with its demands. OpenAI and Microsoft are said to have been working on plans for a massive 5 gigawatt data center known as Stargate that could open by 2028. 5 gigawatts, that's 5 times the capacity of a typical nuclear power plant, all for a single facility. According to the International Energy Agency, United States data centers consumed 183 terawatt-hours of electricity in 2024. That works out to more than 4% of the country's total electricity consumption last year, roughly equivalent to the annual electricity demand of the entire nation of Pakistan. By 2030, this figure is projected to grow by 133% to 426 terawatt-hours. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory published projections in December 2025 showing that by 2028, more than half of the electricity going to data centers will be used for artificial intelligence. At that point, artificial intelligence alone could consume as much electricity annually as 22% of all United States households combined. Gartner analysts estimate worldwide data center electricity consumption will rise from 448 terawatt-hours in 2025 to 980 terawatt-hours by 2030. That's a 119% increase in just 5 years. Now consider what all this electricity consumption means for silver demand. Data centers don't just need silver in their servers, they need silver throughout their entire electrical infrastructure. Power distribution systems that deliver electricity from the grid to thousands of servers use silver-enhanced bus bars and connections to minimize energy loss. Every percentage point of efficiency matters when you're consuming as much electricity as a small city. Cooling systems, which can account for 7% to 30% of total data center power consumption depending on the facility's efficiency, use silver in their control systems and heat exchangers. Uninterruptible power supply systems and backup generators that ensure data centers never go offline depend on silver's conductivity for reliable switching and power management. Network infrastructure, including the switches, routers, and fiber optic connections that enable data to flow between servers, uses silver in critical connection points. According to research from Smart Money Match, a large hyperscale data center can require several thousand ounces of silver across its servers, connections, and cooling systems. The exact figure depends on the technology deployed and the facility's power capacity. Microsoft's $80 billion investment isn't building one data center. It's building dozens, potentially hundreds of facilities around the world. If each major facility requires 3,000 ounces of silver, and Microsoft builds 50 such facilities over the next few years, that's 150,000 ounces of silver demand just from Microsoft alone. Now multiply that across Amazon, Google, Meta, Apple, Oracle, and every other technology company racing to build artificial intelligence infrastructure. Then add in the thousands of smaller data centers being constructed by enterprises, governments, and service providers globally. The numbers start to become genuinely alarming. The Silver Institute reported that industrial silver demand reached 654 million ounces in 2023, with electronics and electrical applications representing the fastest growing segment. Artificial intelligence infrastructure investment is compounding this trend. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta have collectively announced over $200 billion in data center spending through 2025, with more commitments expected. Each large-scale data center requires thousands of servers, and each server contains silver in multiple components. Multiply that across hundreds of facilities being built globally, and the mathematics gets serious quickly. Meanwhile, silver mine production has remained relatively flat. Primary silver mines are rare since most silver comes as a byproduct of zinc, lead, and copper mining. Approximately 71% of mined silver supply comes as a byproduct from polymetallic gold, lead, zinc, and copper mines. You cannot simply open more silver mines when demand spikes. The metal has to come from somewhere, and increasingly, that somewhere is existing above ground stockpiles. Global silver inventories are being depleted at an alarming rate. COMEX registered inventories in the United States are down nearly 70% since 2020. London Bullion Market Association vaults have lost around 40% of their holdings. Shanghai inventories have fallen to their lowest level in a decade. At current consumption rates, some industrial regions have barely 30 to 45 days of accessible silver reserves. This is creating a massive price divergence between paper-traded silver futures and physical metal. In Shanghai, physical silver has been trading above $80 per ounce, while COMEX futures remain in the $30 to $35 range. This price divergence is unprecedented and signals severe stress in the physical silver market. The price of silver broke all records in 2025. In December, silver surged above $65 per ounce, up more than 120% from January 2025, beating even gold's meteoric rise of 64% over the same period. On October 17, 2025, silver hit a record high of $54.48 per ounce. Despite recent corrections, silver has largely held above $47, a sign of the underlying strength in the market. Bank of America raised its 12-month silver target to $65 per ounce. ING projects $55 per ounce by 2026. More aggressive scenarios envision tests of $80 to $100 per ounce between 2027 and 2028. Driven by what analysts describe as a brick wall of intensifying supply-demand imbalance. What makes these projections credible isn't speculation about monetary policy or currency debasement, it's arithmetic. The drivers are structural and unlikely to abate. Artificial intelligence infrastructure deployment is accelerating, not plateauing. Solar installations continue setting records, with China alone increasing its solar capacity by 45% in 2024. Electric vehicle adoption is still in early stages globally, with sales projected to reach 20 million units in 2025. Each of these trends is multi-year, potentially multi-decade in duration. Meanwhile, the supply response remains constrained by geology, capital availability, and time. New mines take 8 to 12 years to develop, and ore grades are declining globally. In 2026, China implemented new export restrictions on refined silver that are already sending shockwaves through global markets. Starting January 1, 2026, only large state-approved companies are allowed to export silver, and only after obtaining special government licenses. To qualify, firms must meet stringent conditions including an annual production capacity of at least 80 tons of silver. These requirements effectively block hundreds of smaller and mid-sized exporters who have long served as key suppliers to global industrial users. China's policy shift is turning a long-term shortage into an immediate global crisis. The export curbs from China, combined with already depleted global inventories and surging artificial intelligence-driven demand, create what some analysts are calling the perfect storm for silver prices. This situation puts technology companies like Microsoft in an extremely vulnerable position. Microsoft's $80 billion artificial intelligence data center investment depends on a stable supply of silver at manageable prices. But what happens if silver prices double or triple from current levels? What happens if physical silver becomes genuinely scarce, with waiting periods measured in months rather than days? Technology companies would face impossible choices. They could delay data center construction, falling behind competitors in the artificial intelligence race. They could redesign their infrastructure to use less silver, but that means accepting lower efficiency and higher operating costs. They could attempt to secure long-term silver supply contracts, but that would lock in high prices and potentially create supply chain vulnerabilities. Or they could pass the costs on to customers, making artificial intelligence services more expensive and potentially slowing adoption. Microsoft hasn't publicly addressed this silver dependency. Neither has Amazon, Google, Meta, or any other major technology company racing to build artificial intelligence infrastructure. The assumption seems to be that silver will always be available in whatever quantities needed at reasonable prices. That assumption is looking increasingly dangerous. Graham Steele, a former Assistant Secretary for Financial Institutions at the United States Treasury Department, once warned about financial institutions understating their risks. The same principle applies here. If technology companies are building massive infrastructure dependencies on a commodity in severe structural deficit, they're creating systemic vulnerabilities that could materialize suddenly and catastrophically. The energy implications alone are staggering. The United States alone could see data centers consuming 12% of total electricity by 2028, up from 4% in 2024. Each hyperscale facility under construction is expected to use as much power as 100,000 households, with the largest consuming 20 times that amount. All of this infrastructure requires the silver-intensive components that make high-density computing possible. In regions like the PJM electricity market stretching from Illinois to North Carolina, data centers accounted for an estimated $9.3 billion price increase in the 2025 to 2026 capacity market. As a result, average residential electricity bills are expected to rise by $18 per month in Western Maryland and $16 per month in Ohio. One study from Carnegie Mellon University estimates that data centers and cryptocurrency mining could lead to an 8% increase in the average United States electricity bill by 2030, potentially exceeding 25% in the highest demand markets of Central and Northern Virginia. Technology companies are effectively transferring the costs of their artificial intelligence infrastructure build-out to ordinary consumers through higher electricity bills, while simultaneously creating dependencies on scarce materials like silver that could constrain future growth. The industry is building faster than the supply chains can support. The semiconductor industry is feeling the strain. NVIDIA's GB200 NVL72 systems are estimated to consume up to 120 kilowatts per rack, compared to perhaps 1/10 of that for classic computing infrastructure. These ultra-high power density systems require advanced cooling, networking infrastructure, and power delivery systems, all of which depend heavily on silver's conductivity. With Gartner predicting that artificial intelligence-optimized servers will rise nearly fivefold from 93 terawatt-hours in 2025 to 432 terawatt-hours in 2030. The silver intensity of the computing infrastructure being deployed is unprecedented. The solar photovoltaic industry provides a cautionary tale. When silver hit $50 per ounce during previous price spikes, solar panel manufacturers operating on razor-thin margins of 5 to 15% suddenly found silver represented a meaningful cost pressure. At 20 grams per panel and $50 per ounce, that's $32 worth of silver per panel, representing 5 to 8% of the total manufacturing cost for panels selling at $400 to $500 each. The industry responded with thrifting efforts, actively reducing silver loading and achieving 15 to 20% reductions in 2024 alone. Researchers are working on copper-based alternatives, but these innovations take years or decades to develop and deploy at scale. France's CEA Research Institute recently achieved below 14 milligrams per watt using copper ribbons combined with copper-silver pastes. But even if copper metallization captures 10% market share by 2027, 30% by 2028, and 50% by 2030, it would only reduce solar's silver demand by about 260 million ounces by 2030. The data center industry hasn't even begun confronting these realities. Technology companies are building infrastructure with the assumption that silver will remain abundant and affordable indefinitely. They're making long-term capital investments without apparently hedging against commodity price risk or supply disruptions. This is especially remarkable, given that these same companies employ some of the world's most sophisticated risk management teams. Either they don't see the silver supply crisis coming, or they believe they'll be able to secure whatever silver they need, regardless of broader market conditions. Both assumptions are dangerous. Physical silver investment demand has surged alongside industrial consumption. Inflows into silver-backed exchange-traded products increased by 187 million ounces in 2025, according to Philip Newman, managing director at Metals Focus. This reflects investor concerns over stagflation, the Federal Reserve's independence, government debt sustainability, the United States dollar's role as a safe haven, and geopolitical risks. Physical buying of silver has surged, with reports of United States and European mints struggling to keep up with coin and bar demand. In the United States, between 2010 and 2024, purchases reached a staggering combined total of 1.5 billion ounces. In India, cumulative bar and coin demand stood at 840 million ounces. German physical silver investment averaged an eye-watering 48.5 million ounces during 2020 through 2022. By 2022, Australia's physical retail demand had surged to a record high of 20.7 million ounces. Investment demand is pulling silver out of circulation just as industrial demand reaches record levels. The result is a collision between industrial necessity and financial hoarding, with both drawing from the same finite resource pool. This dynamic is not temporary. New silver and gold mines take years to permit and build, and many jurisdictions face rising regulatory and capital hurdles. The supply response is slow, while demand growth is exponential. Against this backdrop, technology companies building artificial intelligence infrastructure are competing with solar manufacturers, electric vehicle producers, electronics makers, and investors for access to dwindling silver supplies. Something has to give. The most likely outcome is significantly higher silver prices, which would increase costs for every technology company building data centers. But there are darker scenarios. Genuine physical shortages could emerge, where companies literally cannot obtain the silver they need regardless of price. Supply chain disruptions could create bottlenecks that delay construction projects. Governments might implement export controls or strategic stockpiling programs, further constraining available supply. Technology companies might find themselves forced to retrofit existing facilities with less efficient alternatives, accepting higher operating costs and reduced performance. The $80 billion question, quite literally, is whether Microsoft and other technology giants have adequately planned for these scenarios. Public statements suggest they haven't. Companies continue announcing ambitious expansion plans without acknowledging material supply constraints. They're building as if silver will always be available in whatever quantities needed at whatever price the market sets. That confidence may soon be tested. The next few years will determine whether the artificial intelligence revolution can scale as rapidly as technology companies envision, or whether material constraints like silver shortages become binding limitations on growth. Microsoft's $80 billion investment represents a massive bet that infrastructure can be built faster than supply chains break down. But with 5 consecutive years of silver deficits, collapsing global inventories, surging prices, and accelerating demand from multiple sectors simultaneously, that bet is looking increasingly risky. The artificial intelligence age might be powered by silver, but we're running out, and nobody seems to be paying attention. Make sure you're subscribed because we'll be tracking this story closely as it develops. The intersection of technology, commodities, and geopolitics is creating dynamics that will reshape industries and economies in ways most people aren't even considering yet. Drop a like if you found this information valuable, and share it with anyone who needs to understand the hidden vulnerabilities in our technological infrastructure. The future might not look quite as bright as the technology companies are promising, and you deserve to know why.